GoForThe2.com in with our Week 3 predictions for the college football season. We'll jump right into it. Texas A&M and Auburn. Auburn's looked very well through 2 games. A lot of people buying into this Auburn team after their Week 1 performance against Deshaun Watson and the Clemson Tigers. They dropped that ball game 19-13, but played very well defensively in that matchup. They followed that up last week with a convincing home win over Arkansas State. As a team, they rushed for 462 yards on the ground, but I really feel that Auburn has its hands full this coming weekend with Trevor Knight and the Texas A&M Aggies. You look at Texas A&M overall, they're averaging 317 passing yards per game. Trevor Knight's played well within the system. He's completed 54% of his passes, 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, but the offensive line has played very well. They've only allowed 2 sacks on the year. When I look at this matchup, I look at the wide receiver core offensively for Texas A&M. Ricky Seals-Jones, Josh Reynolds, Christian Kirk, and Speedy Noel going up against Auburn's secondary that's allowing 254 passing yards per game. I think that's the matchup that I liked for Texas A&M in this ballgame, and I really feel that they'll be able to move the football through the air against Auburn. That'll open up running lanes for running back Keith Ford and the rest of the running backs in that matchup. And I like the defensive front 7 led by Myles Garrett in Texas A&M. They're only allowing 78 rushing yards per game. I think they'll be able to make Auburn's offense one-dimensional and put a lot of pressure on Sean White to make plays in the passing game. He's completed 61% of his passes, but I'm not sold on the consistency of Sean White in this ballgame, and I like the more experienced quarterback in Trevor Knight, and I do feel that Texas A&M gets a convincing road victory Saturday night on the Plains in Auburn. I think Texas A&M wins this ballgame by about 14 points Saturday night. They move to 3-0 on the year. Another intriguing battle is UCLA and BYU. BYU got pushed Utah to the limit. They lost that matchup 20-19. They went for it for a 2-point conversion with 10 seconds left in that matchup. Quarterback Taysom Hill was stopped short of the goal line. They now have to come back home to face a prolific offense led by UCLA quarterback Josh Rosen. BYU played very well on the road last year against UCLA. They lost that matchup by 1 point and were able to pressure Josh Rosen into short to intermediate throws. But I really feel this is a bad spot emotionally for BYU. They're coming off a rivalry loss to Utah. They now have to come back home to face a speed team in UCLA, and I do feel that UCLA has the advantage in this battle on the wide receivers going up against the secondary for BYU. BYU lost 2 secondary players last week in the 4th quarter to targeting. Both of those players will miss the first half against UCLA. I think that puts the pressure on BYU, not only defensively, but offensively to match Josh Rosen score for score. And I like UCLA in this battle because of that. I think Josh Rosen breaks out. They had a lackluster 41-21 victory at home in the Rose Bowl against UNLV. I think they have a convincing road victory over the Cougars this coming Saturday. I think UCLA gets a 17-point victory over BYU this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle is Ole Miss and Alabama. Ole Miss has won the last 2 meetings. They dominated on the road in Tuscaloosa. They opened up a 17-3 first half lead. They had a lead in the second half by 19 points. They held on as Alabama made a furious comeback and won that ball game by 6 points. Ole Miss won the turnover battle last year 5-0. But they have a confident quarterback in Chad Kelly that has already beaten Alabama. This is a team that's knocked off the Crimson Tide in back-to-back years. They're looking to make it 3 straight. I like this team from an emotional standpoint. I know they didn't look good week number 1. They jumped out to a double-digit 22-point lead over Florida State before a second-half collapse. But they played, in my opinion, very well defensively against running back Dalvin Cook in the running game. I think the front 7, led by Marquise Haynes, played very well. They were beaten over the top in that secondary and, more importantly, beaten in the short to intermediate passing game. But this is a road game for Jalen Hurts and Alabama. I know they look very well so far, but this is a conference game. I like the front 7 of Ole Miss to force Alabama's offense to methodically work down the field, and more importantly, I like the wide receiver matchup of Ole Miss going up against Eddie Jackson in that secondary. You look at what Ole Miss was able to do last year. They challenged that secondary of Alabama. I think they could do it again in this matchup. I think if they do it early and have success, that'll open up some running lanes and allow Ole Miss to run the football consistently, especially in the second half. And I like Chad Kelly, an experienced quarterback, in this spot. I think Ole Miss pushes Alabama to the limit, but in the end, Alabama picks up a 34-30 victory over Ole Miss. But the Rebels are in this game from start to finish. I think the atmosphere will be crazy. The fans will be up into this ball game. That could be a factor, especially with a young quarterback going on the road in a tough SEC environment. I like the Rebels to keep this game close and play Alabama very, very tough this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle, Notre Dame and Michigan State. Notre Dame has won the last 3 meetings against the Spartans by 12.6 points per game. The last victory came in 2013 against Michigan State. This game, to me, comes down to the quarterbacks. Michigan State quarterback Tyler O'Connor and Notre Dame quarterback DeShone Kizer. Kizer has looked very well so far in the early part of the season. He's completing 71% of his passes. Michigan State will have an extra week of preparation. They had a lackluster performance and a home victory over Furman. They have an extra week to prepare, but I don't think it matters. Wide receiver Torrey Hunter for Notre Dame comes back from concussion protocol. I like the speed of Notre Dame on the perimeter to challenge Michigan State secondary in this ball game, and I like Kizer in this spot at home. I like the balanced offense of Notre Dame in this matchup. They're passing for over 200 yards per game. They're also rushing for over 200 yards per game, and they're playing well. I like the way they played against Nevada, and I also like the way Notre Dame played offensively against Texas week number 1. Kizer looked confident. I think they get a convincing home victory over Michigan State. I call for a 20-point Notre Dame home victory over Michigan State this coming weekend. I just think that they have way too much speed for the Spartans in this matchup. Another intriguing battle is Ohio State and Oklahoma. Ohio State has dominated in 2 games against Bowling Green and Tulsa. Oklahoma looked terrible week number 1 against a mobile quarterback in Greg Ward Jr. They now have to face J.T. Barrett, another mobile quarterback, and we know what Urban Meyer has done in big spots. But again, I like Bob Stoops in the underdog role, and I like the speed of Oklahoma in terms of their skilled players. I like Joe Mixon, I like Perrine, I like D.D. Westbrook on the outside, and I don't like the fact that Ohio State doesn't have a go-to wide receiver at this point in the season. They lost their top 3 wide receivers at the start of the year because of graduation. They lost Jalen Marshall, they lost Michael Thomas, and they lost Braxton Miller. So now a go-to wide receiver hasn't emerged for J.T. Barrett. I think that's going to be the Achilles heel for Ohio State in this ball game. And I like the way Oklahoma's defense has played in run support. They gave up over 300 yards of passing offense week number 1 to Houston, but they held Houston's offense to only 89 rushing yards on the ground. That's a key statistic that I carry into this ball game against J.T. Barrett. I think they could force J.T. Barrett into 3rd down and long situations, and I think the advantage of Oklahoma will fall into play in this matchup. I think Baker Mayfield and the offense strikes first and puts the pressure on Ohio State to respond. In the end, I'm calling for an Oklahoma victory at home. It's a mild upset, but I do feel that Oklahoma gets a 10-point victory over Ohio State. Figure in the area of 33-23. Oklahoma gets a convincing home victory over Ohio State. Another intriguing battle is Florida State and Louisville. Louisville was in this ball game last year. They trailed at half 7-6 to Florida State, but in the second half, Dalvin Cook took over. And you look at Louisville overall, what can you say? Their quarterback, Lamar Jackson's off the hook. This guy has 13 total touchdowns already in the 2016 season. He has 7 through the air and 6 rushing touchdowns. A lot of people just expecting Louisville to dominate this matchup against Florida State. But the one thing when you look at that Louisville victory in the Carrier Dome last week was I saw running lanes by Syracuse that they took advantage of that front seven of Devontae Fields and Kelsey, and more importantly, Josh Harvey Clemens in the secondary. I think they can do the same thing with Dalvin Cook. He's an explosive back. And you look at the wide receivers of Florida State, I think that's a matchup that you have to keep in mind as well. I think you could beat Louisville over the top. They're a solid defense, but I think you could throw over the top. They're not as speedy as people think. And I like Kermit Whitfield, Travis Rudolph, and Jesus Wilson in that battle. I think it's a close game early on, but DeAndre Francois has a monumental second half. I think he goes toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson, and the Seminoles strike the road victory. Call it a mild upset. They're favored in this ball game, but still, I think Florida, a lot of people expecting Louisville to win this game because of Lamar Jackson. He's a one-man show. Florida State has players that can step up if Francois does not bring his A game. That's why I like Florida State, and I think Florida State gets a 13-point victory on the road in Louisville this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle, Michigan and Colorado. This is an old rivalry dating back to the early 90s with Coy Detmer and Michael Westbrook and Cordell Stewart. You remember 1994, Colorado got the Hail Mary over Michigan in that battle. Well, now they come back to the big house. Michigan has looked very well. They're 2-0. They got a dominating home victory over Scott Frost and UCF last week. But here's the thing I look at when I look at Michigan overall. Playing very well in the back end. They're only giving up 108 passing yards per game. Wilton Speight has looked phenomenal in terms of the passing offense. But they're giving up 178 rushing yards on the ground in 2 ball games. You look at Colorado, their offensive line's playing very, very well. As a team, Colorado is rushing for 261 yards on the ground. They have a solid running back in Philip Lindsay, and they have an experienced quarterback in Lou Thal that is a mobile quarterback as well. He can make plays outside the pocket with his legs. And more importantly, I look at this group in Mike McIntyre and Colorado. Nobody's expecting them to win, so I feel that Colorado goes into this matchup loose, and their defense is playing very, very well. You look at Colorado, they're only giving up 98 rushing yards per game, and that secondary is only allowing 68 passing yards per game. I think they could put some pressure on Michigan's offense, force them into third down and long situations, and force Wilton Speight into some turnovers on Saturday. I don't think Colorado loses this game, but I think Colorado pushes Michigan to the limit in the big house. Call for a 9-point Michigan victory, but it is very close, and I think Colorado gives Michigan a scare this coming weekend. We're just getting started. It's the early part of the week. The predictions are out. We'll be breaking these games down Saturday on SB Nation Radio. You can follow me there, sbnationradio.com. Listen to College Football Game Day. Me and Rich Sermonello will be getting in-depth. These are my predictions. I'm feeling confident about these. Stay with me all season long at GoForThe2.com.